Howdy and welcome to the Confidence Through Health podcast. I'm Jerry Snyder. As an elite level athlete, owner of All In Health and Wellness, and author of the book Confidence Through Health, my goal is to help you achieve your goals and dreams using health as the conduit to get there.
To find you a man, oh, you long to hold in your hand the hand of the one that'll never...
I want to take a quick moment to thank our sponsor for this episode, American Sports and Fitness Association. If you are looking for a certification as personal trainer or a group fitness instructor, anything in the sports and fitness world, water aerobics, running, health coach even, anything in that area, you can find the certification at the American Sports and Fitness Association. You can also find textbooks and manuals to be able to help you study up to become certified in any of those areas. If you go to confidencethroughhealth.com, or you can look at the link in the show notes, you'll find the link for the American Sports and Fitness Association, and it will take you there, and you can find the certification that will take you to the career that will change your life. Howdy, and welcome back to the Confidence Through Health podcast. This is your host, Jerry Snyder, and in this episode, we talk about the subject everybody wants to know about when it comes to your health, and that is, how bad is sugar? Is it really the culprit for things that are going on in your body? My guest today is Dr. Mahmud Kara, and he is an expert with over 30 years experience dealing with patients in a clinical setting to talk about sugar, to talk about how it interacts in your body, the differences between natural sugar, unnatural sugar, processed sugar, synthetic sugar, how that all interacts in your body, how it goes from start to finish. We talk about it from start, the moment it touches your taste buds to the moment it leaves your system, and how it interacts with every part of your body as it goes through your system. It's great information. It is really helpful for somebody who is struggling with that sugar addiction or that sweet tooth, and you just can't seem to get over the top and get past it. He shares some tips on how to do that, and we talk about the differences of what your body looks like when you're in that super addictive state to what you can expect when you're out of it, and how much better your health can become when you can get past that sugar addiction. So it's a great conversation, and I think you're going to enjoy it. Well, thank you, Dr. Kara, for being a guest on the Confidence Through Health podcast.
You're very welcome. It's a pleasure.
So before we get into like the meat of what I wanted to bring you on for, just tell us a little bit about like your history. I know you've got over 30 years experience with patient care, but what took you from that to like your passion on functional medicine and really helping people dive into the root cause to fix things?
I love that question. It's probably the question I get asked most.
Sure.
An MD in the, on the dark side, for lack of a better word, right? I mean, it's sort of the way it is. And it started along, it's really funny. When I looked at, how you write a letter to an entrance letter to medical school, why should you take me? It's not just, and I came upon that letter about 10, 15 years ago and realized that from the beginning, I've always been about prevention.
Okay.
Preventing chronic disease, preventing whatever it is, a negative outcome. If there's a way of preventing it from ever happening, then you're much better off, right? So, and that's really at the core of what took me down the journey I've been. So medical school, residency training at the clinic, internal medicine, conventional practice. And then I just sort of progressively started to become jaded with, we're dealing with these things after the fact. It's like, okay, in some ways you almost get irritated. If there's, you have to understand sometimes why physicians get irritated with their patients. It's especially when you know that something was preventable and that there were warning signs. And so I realized that not enough is being done from the prevention, from a therapeutic standpoint, what to do when a person becomes diabetic, if they have a heart attack, if they have liver disease, what do we do after the fact? Medicine has that pretty well taken care of. There's a cadence, there's a role, there's a whatever. The preventative aspect, it seemed like it was very underserved. Right. And so that's why I decided that was for me. It's my passion. It's what I like doing. Conventional medicine to me in many aspects was frustrating. And so I ended up gradually, bit by bit, patients started to realize I had that attitude. They started to come and see me. And my practice grew largely of people coming in saying, I know I have this problem. I know it might be too late, but I really don't want to be on medications. And I heard you can help me find a non-medication alternative, alternative medicine, right? I mean, it's sort of, and so that's how it happened. It just progressed. And eventually I got busy enough that I decided, okay, I did what I call emptying my backpack. I just totally emptied everything and said, I am going 100% non-insurance, non-medication if I can.
Right.
And that's what led me to then the second piece, which is why did I create a company that creates supplements? As I delved more into the alternative remedy, the natural alternative remedy world, I realized that there's a lot of junk out there. And there's a lot of what I call redundancy out there also. People would come to me. I used to say, I spend more time taking people off supplements than I putting them on supplements, right? I mean, you get people come in and they've got these bags. Literally, they walk in with these bags. And I'm saying, okay, you're getting this here and you're getting it here and you're getting it there. Let's just combine it. And so that made me say, okay, I need to do this as well. And that's the natural progression of how things happened.
Yeah. Well, as a health coach myself, that's one of the things that I deal with is people come and they say, I'm taking this supplement or which one of these should I take? Yeah. And I have to go down and say, okay, well, you're already getting enough of this vitamin or enough of this mineral through these other things. Why do you want to take this other stuff just because you saw an ad for it or, the most famous celebrities promoting it or whatever the case is? It's like, it doesn't mean it's good for you because you may already have enough of that to begin with. That might not be the cause of your problem.
And the flip side of that also is that there in some cases, especially, there is such a thing as too many supplements.
Right.
It's not necessarily, I don't use the word overdose because let's face it, it's very hard to overdose on something if done naturally and done right. But there is such a thing as overloading your body. Your body can get distracted and say, I got a lot of that going on. Let me take care of it and maybe not expend enough energy over here. So you can excess in intake of supplements, which is also a bad thing. Right.
But so one of the things I wanted to talk to you about specifically today was sugar and the issue that our country has. And we're coming up to the holidays. And so there's sweets and there's pies and there's baked goods. And a lot of people's attitude becomes, I'm not going to worry about this until January. I'm just going to eat whatever I want. And, I've got that doctor's appointment or my personal trainer's telling me to do this, that, or the other thing. And I'm just going to ignore all that until January and do whatever I want. So when it comes to sugar, there's different forms of it, right? There's natural sugar that you might get in fruit. And then there's the processed junk that we get, whether it's coming from corn or any other source. So how does that react differently in our body if it's coming from a natural source versus coming from that high processed sugar?
Let's divide high processed into two things. The 100% synthetic, the sucraloses of the world, the aspartames, the saccharins, right? Yeah. And then you've got your fructose, for example. It's probably the best example of a natural sugar. It does exist naturally in that form, but is in and of itself a processed additive to a lot of foods. Right. Both, in my opinion, are not good for different reasons. One, if we look at the purely 100% synthetic, there's not a lot. It hasn't been studied a lot from a long-term standpoint. So a lot of the studies that seem to be beneficial towards the makers of these synthetic sugars have been very short-term. And things like, well, it doesn't increase your blood sugar. Okay. Theoretically, perhaps it doesn't, because when you say it doesn't increase your blood sugar, you're looking at glucose. That's all you're looking at, right? I mean, so does it not increase your glucose? Perhaps not. When we measure it, it's 0 calories. Okay. It's one effect that food has on us is through calories, but what about some of the other stuff? And then the big one, which I always have a problem with, is it doesn't increase insulin, and therefore it does not lead to insulin, does not join in the whole insulin resistance party, right? It's not a culprit in the whole. And that's where that's the biggest part I take issue with, is because that ultimately, if we could eat all the sugar in the world that we wanted and never have a problem with insulin, then again, probably nobody cares at that point in time.
Right.
Because you're not going to become a diabetic. Diabetes is when the body stops reacting to insulin or doesn't make enough insulin.
Right.
So the problem is that these synthetic sugars there is some evidence do, and it's in an interesting way. There's two ways that insulin increases. One is the conventional. You eat food, carbohydrates, especially refined carbohydrates, get translated into sugar, glucose specifically, enters the bloodstream, insulin goes up. And then that can start, depending on time, a whole other cascade. But
sure.
Yeah, actually, there's some evidence, again, not a lot of big studies, but there's some evidence that that the synthetic sugars increase insulin in a different way. There's called the cephalic response. And we're learning a lot more about what we call the cephalic response. And that is, how does the brain react to the taste, the sweet taste, the smell of something sugary? And now even more evidence regarding it doesn't even have to taste sweet. Just straight carbohydrates, white bread that is very high in refined carbohydrates, creates an immediate response in the brain. And they did functional MRIs and they were able to show some of this. And so there is a cephalic response, which means you taste something sweet or you smell something sweet, your body produces insulin. It gets a direct impulse from the brain to the pancreas to make insulin, as much as 20% more insulin, like sucralose.
Oh, wow.
Which is one that was studied probably the most. Sucralose was found to increase just cephalically, immediately by the taste, to increase insulin production by as much as 20%.
Yeah.
So over time, nobody says these things. I mean, nobody.
Right. Yeah.
But so over time, is that lending to insulin resistance? Well, okay, fine. Maybe we didn't study that specifically, but do we really need to wait until we find that it's very bad to say, okay, maybe it is, and avoid it?
Right.
Here's a bigger problem. So we tend to look at insulin, right? We tend to look at a lot of insulin, but the problem in some ways, when it comes to the insulin response, sugar, insulin is bad, sugar is bad, where do synthetic sweeteners play in that whole thing?
Yeah.
The addiction to sugar. I think the biggest problem we have today is our addiction to sugar. And the addiction to sugar is not necessarily based on insulin. Some of it is.
Yeah.
People with with insulin resistance tend to want sugar more than other people, because insulin does give you that, I'm hungry, I want something sweet. Some of that does come from insulin, especially drops in insulin.
Yeah.
But more we're realizing now more and more is that these sugar receptors in the mouth, on the tongue especially, have a direct link with the midbrain. Areas in the midbrain. Some say it's the hippocampus, some say it's the amygdala, but somewhere in the midbrain there. Guess what else lives there? We call it our intuitive center. When people say, I felt it from the heart, you didn't feel it from the heart, you felt it from the midbrain. It's your intuitive center. Well, guess what? Addictions live there.
Yeah.
All addictions live in the midbrain. And so sugar receptor and the desire and the taste of sugar lives right next to all of those other bad culprits when it comes to addiction. Sweet, guess what? What did we just say? It's the sweet taste. It's not that the taste receptors in the tongue say, this is glucose, I'm going to react to it, but this may be sweet, but it's not glucose, I'm not. They don't care.
Right.
It's sweet. Right. Yeah. So that to me is where the bigger culprit of the synthetic sweeteners lies, is that they propagate this whole desire for sugar.
Right.
And so we're fooling ourselves if we think that, okay, I'll take a 0-calorie sweetener and I'm fine. No, you're not fine. It's maybe less, but you're not fine.
Yeah. Well, and it's not because it's 0 calorie. You're not, if you need fuel, you're not doing anything to help from that standpoint. And
that's another thing.
You're not cutting the hunger off. You're not cutting any of those things off. You're just getting that quick sensation in the brain. But from a physical standpoint, what's actually happening at your cellular level or, your bodily functions is not getting any help.
There's no nutrient value. There's no whatever. It's just, it's a habit that propagates a habit that propagates further of that habit that potentially propagates addiction to food, sugar, whatever. It's just, there's nothing good about it other than the word 0 calories.
Right. Well, and we have to, unless you're unless you're, I would say morbidly obese or heading that direction, like we all need calories.
Yes.
Like, we need calories to continue to function, and so this huge focus on 0 calories in my mind, it's like, it's so backwards.
It is. Yeah.
Versus like looking at it to the standpoint of like, okay, where am I getting my calories? It's not about no calories or 0 calories, or it's about what's going on with it. Where's the nutritional value? What's helping me get to the next piece I want to get to in life?
And that's very true. I mean, sometimes we tend to be a society of numbers, right? Sometimes to make the easiest way to make a message is to assign a number to it.
Right.
And so calories is an easy number. But the problem is that then you get involved into these 0 calorie, which to me means 0 nutrient value foods and stuff. That's like, oh, don't worry about calories, just have this. Like, no, it doesn't work that way. You need nutrition. All you're doing is you're teaching yourself to eat more quantity wise.
Right.
It's just, that's all you're really doing. It's, I can eat more with less calories. Is that really a good message that we're sending? No, I don't think so.
Right. And so then, fructose is also not bad. I mean, not good for you when it's the high processed refined, even though it's natural. It comes from like corn, like, right. That's a big common one everybody knows about, high fructose corn syrup.
I mean, the easiest source. Yes.
Yeah. And so, it's coming from corn, which is a natural, vegetable. It's there for us. It's not bad for us necessarily if we eat it off the cob, but when it's highly refined like that, it can do some really damaging things, very similar to what you're saying with the synthetics, correct?
Fructose is a really interesting animal. So yes, it is natural, and regardless of where you get it, you could call it natural. The problem is that it is several fold with fructose. One, it can't be used for energy. It has to be converted to glucose. I mean, it could theoretically, if you get into certain starvation modes where you wake up certain other types of hormones that you don't want to be waking up.
Right.
Or if you allow insulin, when insulin gets into very, very high levels, it can do all sorts of things with fat metabolism and storage rates and increasing growth hormone levels through IGF-1 and all these other things that insulin does when it goes very high.
Right.
But fructose, when you eat small amounts of fructose, it's okay because the liver takes it, it converts it to glucose, you use it for energy. And so small amounts of more naturally occurring fructose, which is what happens when you're eating fruits in many cases, is not necessarily that bad as long as you weigh it against other things and you do it intelligently. The problem when you get into these highly refined forms of fructose, especially in larger quantities, is you're now putting a burden on the liver because the body understands that fructose actually, glucose in high quantities damages cells, damages nerve fibers, nerve tissue. We know this. Damages the kidneys, it damages the retina, it does damage when allowed to accumulate in high levels. Now, fructose, I read a study just the other day that fructose causes the same kind of damage, but 7 times more than glucose. So you don't want fructose to accumulate, right? And the body knows this. The body is very smart.
Yeah.
And so it knows this. So what it does is it tells the liver, okay, you go into overdrive, ignore what else you're doing, and convert this fructose into glucose, which, one, you're raising glucose, which is not necessarily a good thing, but two, you're actually putting pressure. So excess levels of fructose have been shown in certain studies to be bad for the liver. So not only is it bad for the cells, it can actually be hepatotoxic when given in large quantities. So no, fructose, despite it being termed as natural, is not good for you.
Right. Well, and then, I mean, as you described it, if your liver's pumping out that much glucose, what is that doing to your insulin level? And so now your pancreas is on overdrive. Like it sends everything into overdrive eventually.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's this circle. It just gets you into this vicious circle.
Yeah.
That is hard to pull away from. That's the biggest issue I have with all of this is you go down this road where your body starts to get used to doing these things and you're waking up, you're waking up processes that were not meant to be used in high volume. They were meant to be used in small, certain instances. I mean, the body, again, is absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah.
What we have in us to be able to withstand insults is incredible. The problem is, in the 21st century, we're not. I would say, insult's the cause of all evil. Inflammation is the root of all chronic disease, and we weren't built for the 21st century. Those are three things I say all the time. And the problem is the 21st century is we're bombarding our body constantly with stuff that on smaller levels it can tolerate. Yeah. It's like inflammation, right? If inflammation happens once a year, it's no big deal.
Right.
If it happens 5 times a year, no big deal. When it's happening 5 times a day, you know, anxiety, same thing. Stress, anxiety. If it happens 1 time a year, no big deal. Twice a year, no big deal. 5 times a day, now that's a problem because you're taxing the body in ways it gets depleted, and it's just not meant to be.
Yeah. Well, and then you get into the other pieces of which I'm sure you talk to your patients about is once you're at that level of, the cycles just keep going. It's like you never get time to stop and recover. And so most of those patients are probably not getting their I say required because it really is required amount of sleep that you need every night.
Yeah.
You're not getting those things. And so you're never, not only are the inputs continually, stacking on top of each other, you're never getting a baseline to just relax and go back to normal and just be without that constant bombardment.
Yeah.
And it's not just body, it's not just the inputs, it's what's going once it starts internally, you've got to stop it.
You do. You need a time of rest. I mean, autophagy and the mTOR gene taught us that a while ago, that the body has these natural processes that it does, and it needs to do it about once every 2 to 3 weeks to naturally detox us from both a cellular level and on upwards. And if you're constantly bombarding your body with stress, constantly bombarding your body with highly refined, high calorie, high sugar foods, constantly bombarding yourself with stress and all of these other things, it doesn't do the autophagy, the mTOR gene remains dominant, and autophagy doesn't occur. So you're not detoxing, you're just accumulating all of these toxins. It's just the body can only take so much.
Right. And one of the things that most people don't think of is that those synthetic sugars are really toxins in your body.
Yeah.
And so if you label them that, then you start to look at foods a little bit differently. It's like, oh, well, this is a sweet treat, but it's like, oh, but this is toxic to my body. And when you change that narrative, it can change the way you look at food.
It absolutely does. And the question I've always had with these things is, nobody's studied long-term whether they have a negative effect on insulin resistance or not. Okay, fine. You want to take that one, you have that one. Yeah. Shame on you, you should be studying it. But on the flip side, has anybody studied where these things are going? Are they metabolized by the liver? Are they accumulating? Are they building up in certain tissues? Right. Are they putting a burden on the kidneys to eliminate them? Nobody looked at any of that, right? I mean, in terms of especially a long term. So it's a double-edged sword. Mm-hmm. But something we always forget is the why. Right? I always try to get people to back off a little bit. It's like, why are you taking that chance?
Right.
I mean, why to begin with? Why? Because it tastes good and it's 0 calorie. Well, fine. I mean, as long as if there's a question mark about something in your health, doesn't it just make sense to just avoid it?
Right.
But people, unfortunately, these days they want what they want, and they'll grasp at the evidence that gives them the reason to do so, and they'll ignore the evidence that says it's bad, and that's unfortunately the way it is. And the food industry, as you and I well know, is very good about pushing all that stuff forward and hiding the rest.
Oh yeah.
It's really unfortunate.
Well, and that's the 2 main things that I ask clients when they come to me, because from a health coaching standpoint, I do things a little differently. I don't go out there and tell people I'm going to help you lose weight or I'm going to help you do all that. Mm-hmm. It's like, I want to get you to where you can eat a healthy meal that's going to serve your body and move you forward. And so as a natural byproduct of that, if you can do that for 6 months, you're going to lose weight if you're overweight. Like you're going to do these things. And And so I'm like, just give me 3 weeks to where we're going to be a little bit strict on what we're eating. Not like super strict as in like every I'm counting every calorie or that kind of thing, but it's like we're eating more vegetables, we're eating more, fruits and nuts, and we're having lean meats and those types of things. We're staying away from the sugars, we're staying away from the soft drinks, we're staying away from those things. And almost every single person that actually will do it, they all start to say, I can taste food differently.
Yeah.
Because they get that sugar's gone, that sugar like coating, as I call it. And then they start to say, as you were alluding to, they start to see the physical evidence themselves. And they say, why was I doing that to myself? Why was I, I don't have brain fog anymore. Why was I eating that way? And it was causing me brain fog, causing me stress, or not allowing me to sleep well, or, and so that's why, 3 weeks is not going to fix your life, but 3 weeks is going to give you enough time, and from what I've experienced, to be able to see it for yourself. And a lot of times that's what it takes.
And that's very true. It is. It shows the light at the end of the tunnel. Really, you're still in the tunnel, but you see it. It's like, okay, I get it. I think I get it. It's also the period of time. I mean, I think the best number I've seen is that sugar cravings are gone within 2 to 3 weeks. Usually, any addiction, if there is a physical piece to it, is usually gone by 72 hours. But within 3 to 5 days at most. So 3 weeks is and that's been my experience as well. Is that 2 to 3 weeks you'll start to feel enough of a difference that you'll be able to see what you need to do. It becomes a lot more tangible.
Right. And so as somebody's looking at it and going, okay, I'm realizing I'm addicted to sugar. I'm realizing I've got all these issues. Like, where do I start? What are like 1, 2, or 3 things that'd be like, here's the, not that it's easy, because none of it's easy, because you've got an addiction you're trying to overcome. Right. And you're in a culture that feeds it. And so like none of it's easy, but what in your experience are like the couple of steps that are like, okay, these are the basic steps to at least get some traction going?
So this is one of those situations where I've actually really embraced the whole sugar is an addiction. And as such, if you handle sugar as an addiction as you would any other addiction, we use cigarette smoking as an example. Is what do you tell people when they want to stop smoking, other than the voodoo stuff that's out there? There's several methods. One is cold turkey, which has the highest success rate over time. 2 is progressive slowing down until the cravings are within tolerable level, at which time it's cold turkey, versus a substitute, right? So the patch, the whatever, the this, the that.
Yeah.
And this, it's the exact same. Cold turkey, sugar or nicotine, has the highest level of suffering for the first few days, but the quickest relief from the whole addiction process, if you will. And so that's usually my recommendation is just listen, just stop. Just stop. Find substitutes if you want, but not sugar. So find agave, or start using agave, or if you really want to. I mean, in the substitution thing, stay away from sugary sodas and pops and candies and cakes and whatever. Just stop it all. Then there's the slowdown, which is how much. It's not like cigarettes where you can count the cigarettes. It's not as easy, but it's not that simple. But you can slow it down. Okay, let's start with the pop. Okay, you're a sugar fiend. You like your cookies, ice cream, soda pop, and I don't know, chocolate. Let's choose 2 of them and just stop them, and then just choose the next one and then stop it. Choose the next one and stop it, and you progress your way down, which again is a way of doing it. But the problem with that is, like any addictions, it's hard. The moment you start to, it's like the body knows. It's it knows that you're trying to trick it, right? It really is. I think the body knows you're trying to trick it and saying, nice try, but no, I'm going to make you feel bad for doing this to me. So you can try that. That to me has been the least successful. I found that to be the least successful. And then substitutes, substitutes. Okay. It's sort of mixed between total abstinence, which just stop eating. So choose the refined sugars that you're consuming again, the soda pops, the candies, the cakes, the ice creams, the cookies, whatever's, and just stop those completely and replace them with, fruit can be very sweet. Yeah. It's watermelon is actually watermelon, although that's a whole other glycemic index.
Right.
Actually, it's one of those very interesting things. It's very high on the glycemic index, but it's low on the glycemic load.
Right.
So actually, watermelon is not a bad way of fixing a sweet tooth, right? Yep. Grapes is another one, high on the glycemic index, but low on the glycemic load, which basically means there's a lot of sugar in it, but to get that same amount of sugar, you'd have to eat so much of it. It's not going to happen, right? So, so that's the replacement method. So cold turkey is the best. Just start eating vegetables, fruit, fats, and protein, with not too much on the sweet side.
Right.
Teach those receptors in the tongue that they're not going to light up anymore. And over time, it's called downregulation. Over time, the receptors in the brain that make you want it, they will downregulate themselves and they become less and less and less and less. Mm-hmm. And they will fire less and you'll have less cravings.
Yeah.
2, like I said, is start to gradually decline. And 3 is find a substitute. Those are the 3 in order of success.
Right. Well, and you said something there that both with the smoking analogy and with the sugar, in that like there's going to be an amount of suffering. Like,
yes,
no
matter what,
that initial time, where no matter if you cut it off immediately or if you slowly drop down and then you cut it off, like whenever you stop and have the last one from that point, there's going to be suffering because, like you said, your body knows you're trying to do something against it.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people get to that point and don't know how to push through. They get there and they're like, or they didn't realize, like, if I'm not eating sugar, I'm supposed to feel better. Why am I feeling horrible?
Mm-hmm.
And it's that you got to get through to the other side. Like you said, you can see the end of the tunnel, but you got to get there. And it's not just an easy straight shot.
No, and that's why one of the reasons I think just sort of complete abstinence or just cold turkey is the best way to go, because it's going to get you there the quickest.
Right.
It really is. I mean, there's going to be 3 to 5 days of suffering. It's like, I don't know, have you ever heard of the Master Cleanse?
Yes.
So I did that once. And I'm a fan of the Master Cleanse. I think because the Master Cleanse, also what they're doing is telling your liver to detox.
Right.
It's not trying to use something external to detox, which I don't believe in to begin with. I think it's you use food to detox.
Sure.
So I did the Master Cleanse, and for the first 24 to 48 hours, I'm like, okay, don't feel too good. But at day three, the fog just suddenly started to lift. Mm-hmm. And most people, if you talk to, now that's the most severe form of cold turkey, right?
Right.
I mean, it's like the Master Cleanse. I mean, that's hardcore cold turkey. It really is.
Yeah.
But sometimes you have to reduce it to the ridiculous to really show what's happening and get people to understand. And by day 3, the brain fog was starting to, I started to feel more energy and less brain fog. And by day 4, I'm like, wow, I didn't realize what I was doing to myself.
Right.
and so and if you think about it, it took me 4 days to get that brain fog lift, energy improvement, as opposed to doing it otherwise where it might take you 3 weeks.
Right.
So it's depending on the choice you make, the how bad do I feel and how long is it going to take me to feel better could take longer.
Right.
So, it's
depending on which way you decide to go.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the tricky things with sugar specifically, because it's masked in so many different foods, we learned this because when we brought our daughter home, she's 13 now, but I guess it was probably maybe a year and a half, 2 years old. And we found out she had a corn allergy, and we were like, oh my gosh, okay. Corn's now we find out in everything under so many different names.
Yeah.
and it's just like, and this was before I was a health coach, and I was just helping people with their fitness, and I didn't really dive into nutrition until this happened. And I was like, this opened my world, like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. How the food companies have, in a way targeted us because they're trying to make money and they're trying to make a profit.
Yeah.
And so they've targeted us because they know if they can give us this much of something, and it like you said, it lights us up and it makes us feel good, and then we're going to go get more, and we're going to get more, and our portion control's gone out the window.
Mm-hmm.
We're eating way more than we should. So they're making a ton of profit because they're able to produce more. Whereas if we ate like we should, I think the grocery stores would be smaller.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, they don't care, right? I mean,
Right.
they have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders to make more
Right.
money. So it's like rationalizing that. To me, that's how you rationalize the I don't care.
Yep.
It's the fiduciary responsibility to me is I don't care.
Yep.
It's unfortunate. When I first started to become an entrepreneur, somebody who is like a marketing guru,
Mm-hmm.
said, "Are you familiar with the potato chip theory of marketing?" I said, "I have no idea what that is." Well, potato chip companies, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, whatever it is, I have no idea, came and said, "We want to sell more potato chips. How do we do it?"
Yeah.
And so they decided it came down to a fundamental decision. Do we try to get our current buyers to buy more,
Mm-hmm.
or do we find methods of getting more buyers to buy potato chips? And they decided, I sat down there, they decided that they were going to pursue we are going to get the people who currently are buying from us to buy more. Mm-hmm. So how do they do that? They started finding chemicals and additives and whatever, and the cornstarches and the this and the that, to make people want it more. So by making it tastier and by adding it more sugary and whatever to it, they ultimately started to add that to the list of foods that are semi-addictive, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, they almost created addictions by doing that.
Right.
And that's the food industry. The food industry realized many, many, many years ago that they make more money by increasing the amount of that their current consumers buy, as opposed to, now, not to say that there isn't efforts to bring new people on board, because ultimately you get the fall off rate, so you have to bring other people to take those that left.
Right.
But that's ultimately what the food industry does. How can I make it more palatable? How can I make you want more of it? And that's a slippery slope, right? I mean, you allow yourself to go down that road. That's a slippery slope.
It is, and unfortunately, like what I think we're seeing, because I know there's debate on, it's the fast food industry that caused all the weight gain over the past, couple of decades, or it's this or it's that, or, what is it? But when you look at China, it's very clearly, once the first fast food went in, and their obesity rates have skyrocketed,
mm-hmm.
And so it's like, it's pretty clear that they play a role in this.
They absolutely play a role, no doubt.
But their marketing is, and that's one of the things I tell people when they're like, okay, if you have to leave your office for lunch, before you leave, you have to have a plan, because as soon as you leave and you head down the road, you're going to see fast food, and they're all going to have advertisements, and they're going to smell good, and they're all going to have, and you're just going to pull into the first one that doesn't have a long line.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're going to say, okay, give me the biggest thing you got because it's the best value. And it's like, they know. Absolutely. They know that we don't have that self-discipline, and we don't have that control until we take it. And if you're eating sugar and you're eating greasy food, it like you don't have control.
No, and you're getting two of the worst things for you, sugar and trans fats.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't get worse than that. Highly inflammatory on both ends.
Yep. And so in speaking of, like, the gut. So just to touch on that, because I know you've done a lot with your supplements and looking at gut health and how sugar affects the gut and the foods that we eat and what we need. Like when we're looking at our gut, and for those that don't know, I've done other podcasts on this. So if they've regular listeners, they've heard this about the connection between your gut and what's happening in the rest of your body, and the gut brain connection and all that.
Yeah.
So like, your gut specifically and the microbiome in there, and like how do you get a good gut flora going on? What does sugar do to that, and how long should it take after like you go cold turkey? It's not just going to be the next day your gut's back to normal. Right.
So sugar affects the microbiome in a couple of different ways, one directly and one indirectly. And there is actually some evidence that synthetic sugars affect the microbiome even more, potentially from a chemical. But so there's the direct way, there's the obvious, which is bacteria need energy just like anything else, right? And so there are certain strains of bacteria, especially, that can use glucose more efficiently than others. As it turns out, is those strains of bacteria that can use sugar and glucose more efficiently than others are not the ones that are good for us.
Of course.
The good bacteria, the ones that affect us positively and not negatively, they actually don't like sugar. They don't like glucose. They prefer unrefined fiber, whole food fibers. That's their food, right? I mean, I always harp on prebiotics, probiotics, and postbiotics. Prebiotic is whole food fiber. Probiotics are the organisms. They need the whole food fiber. If you're not giving it to them, you might as well be starving them. And postbiotics are the beneficial metabolites that the probiotics make. Now, what you're doing when you're giving too much glucose is these, from a direct standpoint, these guys over here that are beneficial can't metabolize sugar as well because they're not built that way. Start to get suppressed, or even if they're not suppressed, even if they remain stable, you're strengthening the bad guys. It's almost like you're giving them ammunition and weapons and saying, "Here you go." We're making Supermen out of these other bacteria which we don't like and aren't good for. So they overgrow, and then by their overgrowth, they suppress the good bacteria. Alternatively, high glucose diets, high refined glucose diets tend to be high in refined foods in general, which means that your nutrient content is low and your fiber content is low. So even just from you're feeding the enemy bacteria and you're depriving the good bacteria of fiber. So from both a direct and an indirect standpoint, you're harming the microbiome. And by harming the microbiome, you are, the gut-brain connection, the immune, some of those metabolites that help the immune system, you're directly impacting the body. The gut microbiome and the effect on the body, we don't need to go on that. As you said, you've done it, but it's huge in my opinion. It's absolutely huge. When it comes to, how do you fix it? And you're right, total abstinence, a part, in my opinion, is not just the craving and addiction. I think a part of the reason we feel so bad is because, one, you're depriving those bacteria, the bad bacteria, of sugar. So now they're starting to starve. And your flora, your gut flora, is now putting itself into I'm not going to call a vacuum, but now you don't have almost any level of bacteria, and the gut needs that for digestion. So your digestion, which is sort of counterintuitive, right? You reduce sugar, it impacts, you're not digesting as well. It's like, wait a minute, I thought sugar was bad for digestion. It is, but by depriving suddenly the gut of sugar, you're depriving them of certain levels of bacteria, so it impacts the digestive process. Not just the cravings and the neuroendocrine system or what have you. So it's impacting in that regard. So I usually recommend go on a good probiotic. And that hastens the process. So when you go no sugar, you should be taking a probiotic because you're now hastening that building back up of the good flora that you need. And any good probiotic should have fiber in it. A probiotic that does not have fiber in it, just don't bother taking it. It's just not. In my opinion, it's not worth taking. So that's that whole thing, how that sort of happens.
Well, and that's one of the things that I actually like, just for even processed foods. If somebody's like, I can do most of this stuff, but I still want to have this or that, or whatever kind of meal. And I'm like, okay, well, we've all heard use the word moderation. Like, okay, well, there's a place for, and I don't call them cheat meals because it puts a negative connotation on it. There's a place for going off and having something that's unhealthy every once in a while, okay, it depends on, the repercussions and what's going to happen. But
Yeah.
what you want to look for is what's the sugar content and then what's the fiber content. And if it's not close to the same, like, you don't want it because it's just way too much. It's unnatural sugars and added sugars.
Yeah.
And not enough fiber to counteract that. And like you just explained, when you get that much sugar, it does just the opposite of what you really want your gut to do.
Yeah.
So
it does. It slows everything down. It messes with everything. It just from the moment, I mean, if you really think about it, sugar, it's one of those things that starts to impact your body negatively from the moment it gets into your mouth, from the moment it hits your tongue.
Yep.
It's starting this addiction process and a cephalic response to insulin production.
Yep.
Then it goes to the gut. It's messing with your microbiome. It's actually, the gut preferentially will digest a carbohydrate meal over a fat meal. It's just lower energy. And then it gets into your bloodstream. It causes insulin spikes. And then if there's an insulin spike, then there's an insulin fall. And then, so from the moment you touch it to when it gets all the way through, sugar is having bad effects on you. Yep. It's not just, sometimes we mistakenly look at sugar as a blood sugar spike, right? It's like, I used to have problems with patients who were using their preprandial, their sliding insulin intake of the fast-acting insulins. And we would try to teach them that, it's a sliding scale based on how much you're eating. And people, sometimes would say, oh, well, cool, I can eat more and just use more insulin. It's like, no, no, you don't want to do that. I mean, it's even worse. But it's from the moment it enters your body, it's doing harm.
Yep. Well, I think that's a great synopsis of everything too. And so I want to give you an opportunity to talk about how people can get in touch with you, where they can find your supplements that you've created, and like, just if they have any questions, how to get a hold of you.
The where to get the supplements is easy. KARAMD.com. Go there, and we have multiple methods right now. Yeah, you can. I mean, I experiment. In fact, just today, I did an experiment. If you in the search box, you put ketones, it'll show you what articles, because we're always education heavy on the website. So it'll show you, what blog articles it'll have, but it'll also show you what products are related to the problem you're looking for. So that's when we have a quiz you can take, you can answer, and I put it together myself, and you can answer these questions, and I try to, I think it's 15 questions if memory serves me, and then based on the questions you answered, it'll make suggestions for products. Mm-hmm. So that's the easiest way. Then Facebook, so Shop Kara MD on Facebook and Instagram. That's probably the easiest way. If you want to ask questions, you can post questions there, and we get so many. So I always apologize. I can't get to all of them, but the team does try to lump them in together. And actually, we're starting a process where we're going to try to do a weekly video based on the questions that we're answering. So I just did one on probiotics, of all things.
Right.
I'm getting ready, actually, even though the team, I'm getting ready because it is National Diabetes Month, to do one on diabetes. And so that's a very, Facebook and Instagram, I would say, would be a better place to get answers for things.
Right.
If you think you want to go down that road and just need help with what to get, go to the site. Right. And then, of course, there's other methods. Cool. Can I take a minute and plug a new product we're coming out with? Absolutely. Okay. And here it's because diabetes and blood sugar is something I'm very passionate about. And then you as a health coach will understand the second one, which is hydration, fluid intake. Mm-hmm. It's huge, right? I mean, in my opinion, some of the bigger problems, magnesium is probably one of the biggest deficiencies, in my opinion. People always think vitamin D. Yeah, vitamin D is, but magnesium is and then fluid intake, and it's problematic. And we always think of it as dehydration. Well, it takes a lot for your body to become dehydrated. Right. But there are stages in between, right, that have a negative impact and can be impacting people. So I did not want to get into the drink world, but we're coming out. It's that there's such, again, it's the same thing. Pardon my, but there's such crap out there.
Oh yeah.
Okay, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do it right. So we're coming out with a I call it a rehydration product, although it's not necessarily rehydration that you only use it if you're dehydrated, but a hydration product, it's good for maintenance once a day. And everybody, we have our I don't want to call it our prototypes, but our samples now. We've decided on what we want, and we got the taste down because getting taste down when you don't want to use artificial stuff, not easy.
Yes, it's not easy.
It's a big challenge. It really is. We go through so much to get the taste down by only using natural stuff.
Yeah.
And I try to do it daily. If I feel that I'm getting low in hydration, notice I did not use the word dehydration.
Right.
Low in hydration. I do it twice a day. And so we're coming out with it's going to be called Pure IV. And hopefully keep our fingers crossed. We should, the first or second week in December, we should have our first 4 flavors out.
Nice. Well, I'm also an athlete, and like an endurance athlete. So hydration is like, for me, it's key, but I also know that, I mean, I've heard multiple people, in this space that have said anywhere from, 50 to 70% of people are dehydrated, or not fully hydrated,
Not fully hydrated is that's a good way of saying
it. And then, other doctors that say, if you look at the list of traditional chronic diseases that we have, a vast majority of them can go away if we just stay hydrated.
Are you familiar with the study that they did a while ago about doing nothing but increasing your fluid intake can, within 30 days, you can lose up to 5 to 7 pounds by doing nothing more than increasing your hydration level. That's it. So it's amazing. It's one of those hidden issues that I think the more research they do into it, the more they're going to find that low hydration levels or being inappropriately or not fully hydrated is creating health impacts that we just don't know. We don't realize.
Yep.
And my belief is that there's a whole host of issues that are being caused by lack of fluid intake.
Yep.
And so I'm jumping into the hydration market.
Awesome. Well, I may have to have you on again to talk about that, because that's a whole nother.
Oh, I would love to. Yeah, that's you might have more to say on that one than I do, probably. Yeah. Absolutely. I'd love to.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being a guest. It's been great.
Thank you for having me.
The content has been unbelievable. We'll hopefully talk soon about hydration.
Absolutely. Yeah, anytime.
Thanks for checking out the All in Health and Wellness Confidence Through Health podcast. Our goal is to use health as a conduit to help you reach your goals in life.
A little lighter than me. I'm about to black out. Her grip is getting tighter on me. I think I like it deep inside. I feel the fire in me. She like the milky, see me creaming to the coffee to me. She got soul in her sway.